Oh gitu.
Kan ini kan yang dilihat kan itu baca kan penjelasannya kan belum bahasa Inggris. Ya kan yang itu kan Sarif Nabil. Ada lu belum masuk jadwal.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Oke, di sini saya akan membawakan buku yang berjudul Prolegomena to the Metaphysics of Islam, karya dari Syed Muhammad Naqib Al-Atas. Syed Muhammad Naqib Al-Atas ini lahir pada tanggal 5 September 1931. Umur beliau menyentuh 94 tahun, hampir 1 abad. Dan beliau berasal dari negara Malaysia. Pekerjaannya, beliau sebagai Kepala Divisi Sastra jurusan Studi Melayu Universitas Malaya. Dan beliau juga Dekan Fakultas Sastra dan Ilmu Sosial Universitas Malaya, Direktur Istak pada tahun 1991 sampai 2002. Oke, kita masuk ke introduction. Nah, introduction. From the perspective of Islam, a worldview is not merely the mind view of the physical world and of man's historical, social, political, and cultural involvement in it as reflected, for example, in the current Arabic expression of the idea formulated in the press Nazrat al-Islam is al-Kaun. It is incorrect to refer to the worldview of Islam as Nazrat al-Islam lil Kaum. This is because, unlike what is conveyed by Nazrat, the worldview of Islam is not based upon philosophical speculation formulated mainly from observation of the data of sensible experience of what invisible to the eye. Not is it restrict to count, which is the word of sensible experience, the word of creating, if such expression are now in use in Arabic in contemporary Muslim talk, it only demonstrates that we are already being unduly influenced by modern secular Western scientific conception of the world that is restricted to the world of sense and sensible experience. Islam does not consent to the dichotomy of the sacred and the profane. The worldview of Islam encompasses both ad-dunya and al-akhirah, in which the dunya aspect must be related in a profound and inseparable way to the akhirah aspect, and in which the akhirah aspect has ultimate and final significance. The dunya aspect is seen as a preparation for the akhirah aspect. Everything in Islam is ultimately focused on the akhirah aspect, without thereby implying an attitude of neglect or being unmindful of the dunya aspect. Reality is not what is often defined in modern Arabic dictionaries as waqiyah, was used particularly in its grammatical form. Waqi is now in vogue. Reality is haqiqah, which significantly is now seldom used due to the preoccupation with waqiyah, which only points to factual or occurrences. The factual occurrence is only one aspect in many of haqiqah, whose ambit encompasses all of reality. Moreover, an factual occurrence may be an actualization of something false. Pendahuluan buku ini menguraikan landasan filosofis tentang apa yang disebut al-atas sebagai pandangan alam Islam, the worldview of Islam. Beliau menjelaskan bahwa pandangan alam Islam itu bukan sekedar pandangan mental tentang dunia fisik, melainkan pandangan tentang realitas dan kebenaran yang muncul dari pandangan batin, intuisi terhadap hakikat segala sesuatu. Beberapa poin penting dalam pendahuluan tersebut mencakup definisi ru'yat al-Islam lil wujud, pandangan Islam terhadap realitas yang mencakup dunia syahadah dan akhir. Kritik terhadap pandangan barat, al-atas berpendapat bahwa pandangan dunia barat bersifat sekuler, senantiasa berubah dan berpusat pada akal manusia semasa tanpa bimbingan wahyu. Integrasi agama dan ilmu. Dalam Islam, agama bukanlah sesuatu yang terpisah dari ilmu pengetahuan atau realitas objektif. Keduanya adalah satu kesatuan yang koheren. Penjelasan poin-poin utama. 1. Pandangan alam, worldview, sebagai visi realitas. Al-Atas mendefinisikan pandangan alam Islam sebagai vision of reality and truth, visi tentang realitas dan kebenaran, beberapa dengan definisi barat yang seringkali membatasi pandangan dunia pada spekulasi filosofis atau empirisme. Dalam Islam, pandangan ini berakar pada wahyu Al-Quran dan didukung oleh akal serta intuisi spiritual. Yang kedua, karakteristik permanen atau stabilitas. Salah satu argumen utama dalam pendahuluan ini adalah bahwa elemen-elemen fundamental dalam pandangan alam Islam bersifat tetap dan permanen. Karena kebenaran berasal dari Tuhan yang mutlak, maka nilai-nilai etika, konsep Tuhan, dan tujuan hidup manusia tidak berubah mengikuti zaman atau tren sosial. Ini kontras dengan modernisme yang menganggap segala sesuatu relatif. Ketiga, ada konsep kebahagiaan, sa'adah. Beliau menjelaskan bahwa kebahagiaan dalam Islam bukan sekedar kesenangan jasmani atau emosi sesaat, melainkan kondisi ketenangan jiwa yang dicapai melalui pengenalan terhadap Tuhan dan kepatuhan kepadanya. Hal ini berkaitan erat dengan konsep keyakinan. 4. Makna keberadaan, eksisten. Al-Atas menekankan bahwa realitas tidak hanya terdiri dari materi yang tampak. Dunia fisik hanyalah ayat atau tanda-tanda yang menunjuk pada realitas yang lebih tinggi atau Tuhan. Memahami dunia berarti memahami hubungannya dengan Sang Pencipta. Oke, jadi kesimpulan dari pendahuluan ini adalah secara keseluruhan bagian pendahuluan ini berfungsi sebagai kerangka untuk bab-bab selanjutnya. Al-Atas ingin menegaskan bahwa untuk memecahkan masalah masyarakat Muslim modern seperti tantangan sekularisasi, umat Islam harus kembali memahami struktur dasar pandangan hidup mereka yang bersifat metafisika, bukan hanya sekedar mengikuti metodologi berpikiran barat. Oke, sekarang kita lanjut ke bab 1. Islam, the concept of religion and the foundation of ethnic and morality. The concept couched in the term din, which is generally understood to mean religion, is not the same as the concept religion as interpreted and understood throughout Western religious history. When we speak of Islam and refer to it in English as a religion, we mean and understand by it the deen in which all the basic connotation inherent in the term deen are conceived as gathered into a single unity of coherent meaning as reflected in the Holy Quran and in the Arabic language to which it belongs. The word din derived from the Arabic root. Din has many primary significations with which, although seemingly contrary to one another, are yet all conceptually interconnected. So that the ultimate meaning derived from the all presence. It serves as a clarified unity of the world. By the world, I mean that which is described as the religion of Islam, which contains within itself all the relevant possibilities of meaning inherent in the concept of deen. Since we are dealing with an Islamic concept which is translated into actual reality in the intimately and profoundly lived in human experience. The apparent contradictions in its basic meanings is indeed not due to vagueness. It is rather due to the contrariness inherent in human nature itself, which they faithfully reflect, and their power to reflect human nature faithfully. It is it itself clear demonstration of their lucidity and veracity and authenticity in conveying truth. The primary signification of the term din can be reduced to four. One is indebtedness, two is submissiveness, three is judicial power, and four natural inclination or tendency. In what presently follow, I shall attempt to explain them briefly and place them in their relevant context, drawing forth the coherent ultimate meaning intended, which denotes the faith, beliefs, and practice and teaching adhered to by the Muslim individually and collectively as a community, and manifesting itself altogether as an objective goal as the religion called Islam. The verb dana, which derives from din, conveys the meaning of being indebted, including various other meanings connected with debts, some of them contraries in the state in which one finds oneself being in debt. That is to say, ada in it follows that one subjects oneself in the sense of yielding and obeying to law and ordinance governing debts, and also in a way to the creditor, who is likewise designated as da'in. There is also conveyed in the situation described the fact that one in debt is under obligation or debt. Being in debt and under obligation naturally involves judgment, dainu'ah, and confession. Ida'anah, and the case may be all the above signification, including their contraries, inherent in dana are practicable possibilities only in organized societies involved in commercial life, in towns and cities, denoted by mudun or madain. A town or a city, a Medina has judge, lawyer, and governor. A Dayan just already here. In the various application of the verb dana alone, we think rising before our minds a picture civilized living of societal life of law and order and justice and authority. It is conceptually at least connected intimately with another verb, madana, which means to build or to found cities, to civilize, to refine, and to humanize. Jadi pada bab satu ini kita menjelaskan tentang konsep agama, pendahuluan dan etimologi din. Konsep agama dalam Islam dinyatakan dengan istilah din. Istilah ini bukan sekedar bermakna agama dalam pengertian umum barat atau religion, melainkan memiliki akar kata D, Y, dan N yang mengandung 4 makna utama yang saling berkaitan. Yang pertama, keberhutangan, indebtedness. Manusia berada dalam keadaan berhutang kepada Tuhan karena telah diciptakan dan diberikan eksistensi. Yang kedua, ada kepatuhan, submissionness. Karena berhutang, manusia secara alami harus patuh kepada otoritas yang memberinya eksistensi. Yang ketiga, kekuasaan hukum, judicious power. Adanya hukum dan tatanan yang mengatur hubungan antara yang berhutang, manusia, dan yang diberi hutang, Tuhan. Yang keempat, kecenderungan alami, natural inclination atau fitrah, bahwa beragama adalah watak dasar atau fitrah manusia. Kata din yang berasal dari akar kata dyn mengandung makna keberhutangan. Keberhutangan ini merupakan esensi dari keberadaan manusia. Manusia berhutang diri mereka sendiri, substansi mereka, dan segala sesuatu yang mereka miliki kepada pencipta mereka. Sebagai konsekuensi dari hutang ini, manusia mengembalikan dirinya kepada pemiliknya yang asli melalui pengabdian dan kepatuhan. Terus ada poin-poin yang ada di buku satu ini. Yang pertama, ada konsep transaksi spiritual. Hal atas menjelaskan bahwa hubungan manusia dengan Tuhan dalam Islam mirip dengan sebuah transaksi spiritual. Manusia menjual dirinya dalam kurung kepatuhan total kepada Allah untuk mendapatkan keselamatan dan kebahagiaan abadi. Terus yang kedua, makna Madinah, kota. Penulis menghubungkan kata din dengan Madinah atau kota. Hidup beragama berarti hidup dalam tatanan hukum yang teratur, seperti masyarakat dalam sebuah kota yang beradab. Inilah mengapa Islam sangat menekankan pada hukum dan keadilan. Ketiga, ada fitrah, sifat dasar. Agama bukan sesuatu yang dipaksakan dari luar, melainkan pemenuhan atas janji asli manusia kepada Tuhan sebelum mereka dilahirkan ke dunia, merujuk pada peristiwa mithaq dan perjanjian primordial. Yang terakhir, Islam sebagai penyerahan diri. Agama yang benar adalah Islam, yang secara harfiah berarti penyerahan diri. Submission, penyerahan ini harus dilakukan dengan sukarela, penuh kesadaran dan cinta, bukan karena paksaan. Guys, the meaning and experience of happiness in Islam. Happiness, according to the perspective of Islam, is expressed by the term sa'adah, and it relates to two dimensions of existence, to the hereafter ukhrawiyah and to the present world dunyawiyah. The contrary of sa'adah is shaqawah, which conveys the meaning of great misfortune and misery in general. With respect to the hereafter, sa'adah refers to ultimate happiness, which is everlasting felicity and bliss, the highest being the vision of God, promised to those who is in worldly life have lived in willing submission and conscious and knowing obedience of God's commands and prohibitions. This being so, we see that the relation of sa'adah to the hereafter is very closely connected with its relation to the present world, with respect to which it relates to their things. The first, to the self, nafsiyah, such as pertains to knowledge and good character, and two, to the body, badaniyah, such as good health and security. And 3. To things external to the self and the body, kharijiyyah, such as will and other causes that promote the well-being of the self, the body, and the external things and circumstances. In relation to them, happiness in the present world pertains therefore not only to the secular life, it has also to do with life as interpreted and guided by religion whose source is revelation. As to the relation of happiness to the self, which we say pertains to knowledge and good character, Islam teaches that the seed of knowledge in man is a spiritual substance variously referred to in the Quran and his heart, or his soul or self, nafas, or his intellect, akal, or his spirit, ruh. Since the self is intimately involved in a dual aspect of body and soul, it is described on the one hand as the animal soul, al-nafs al-hayawani, and on the other hand as the rational soul, al-nafs al-natiq, and its destiny in the attainment of happiness here and of ultimate happiness in the hereafter depends upon which aspect it chooses to align itself with the correspondent white. Both aspects possess powers or faculties who the faculties of the animal soul are motive and perceptive, and those of the rational soul are active and cognitive, insofar as it functions as the active intellect in this principle of movement of the human body. It is the practical reason and directs individual action in agreement with the theoretical faculty of the cognitive intellect. In relation to the motive power of the animal soul, which is responsible for the exertion of willing, that desire or aversion shall issue in action. It produces human emotions in relation to the perspective power and its representative, estimative, and imaginative faculties. It manages physical objects and produce human skill and art. And in relation to its faculty of rational imagination, it gives rise to premise and conclusions. Insofar as it governs and manages an human body, it induces ethical behavior in men involving the recognition of vice and virtues. Virtue, fadilah, may be classified under a general heading of excellence of mind or discernment and good character. Character is a stable state of soul. If this state causes action commanded by the intellect and by religion, it is called good character. Good character may be achieved by learning and habituation, and in some cases it may come by nature as a divine gift. Character may change for bad to good and conversely for good to bad. The goal of good character is happiness, both in this world and in the hereafter. In order to produce virtue and good character, the animal soul and its bodily faculties must be subordinate to the practical faculty of the rational soul, which directs individual action after deliberation in accord with what agrees with the theoretical faculty. In order to achieve good character, the intellect must be trained in deliberate thinking and reflection. Only when this has been accomplished Can it realize wisdom, the faculty of desire? When trained, will realize temperance and that of anger courage. When desire and anger subordinate to intellect, justice is realized, and the mean al-waswal is then to be achieved by these two bodily faculties after they have been trained and disciplined by the practical faculty of the rational soul, leading to the attainment of good character. The training of the bodily faculties needs free choice, contrary to the invariable translation by most people of the word ikhtiyar by choice. We maintain that ikhtiyar does not simply mean choice. The word khair, meaning good, which is born in meaning with ikhtiyar and being derived from the same root, determines that the choice mean is towards what is good. This point is most important when aligned to the philosophical question of freedom. The so-called choice toward what is bad is therefore not a choice. Since we affirm that freedom is to act as a real and true nature demands only the exercise of that choice, which is God, and properly be called a free choice. A choice for the better is an exercise of freedom. It presupposes knowledge of God and evil. For the worst is not a choice, as it is based up, upon ignorance and on the indignation of the soul that inclines towards an blameworthy aspect of the animal power. The philosophic virtues on temperance, correct wisdom, and justice are not in themselves sufficient to produce in the self the kind of happiness that is experienced to a being and not determined by external and temporal circumstance. We do agree that if happiness it is understood to relate only the temporal, secular dimension of life without any reference to the hereafter, it is a state that undergoes change and variation in degrees from moment to moment, or it is something that cannot be consciously experienced from the moment to moment here in this world, and can be judged as having been attained by one only when one's worldly life, if it's virtuously lived and attended by favorable circumstance, has come to an end. But we do not restrict our understanding of happiness only to the domain of temporal secular life. For science, we affirm that the relation of happiness to the hereafter has an intimate and considerable bearing upon its relation to worldly life, and science in the former case in its spiritual and permanent condition, that is, even in its temporal and secular involvement, an element of happiness that we experience and are conscious of that once attained is permanent. We do not agree, therefore, with the Aristotelian position that virtue and happiness relate only to this world, and that consequently happiness as a permanent condition experience. Consequently, in this course of unworldly life is unsustainable. Oke, dari buku 2 ini menjelaskan the meaning and experience of happiness in Islam, makna dan pengalaman kebahagiaan dalam Islam. Bab ini sangat penting karena meredefinisi kebahagiaan dari perspektif sekuler, perspektif metafisika Islam. Bab 2, makna dan pengalaman kebahagiaan dalam Islam. 1. Definisi kebahagiaan, sa'adah. Al-Atta atas menjelaskan bahwa dalam Islam kebahagiaan tidak sama dengan istilah barat modern seperti happiness yang sering dikaitkan dengan kesenangan sesaat atau pleasure. Kebahagiaan atau sa'adah bukanlah suatu kondisi yang berkaitan dengan perasaan atau emosi sesaat. Bukan pula sesuatu yang bersifat fisik atau material. Ia adalah suatu kondisi permanen dalam jiwa yang berasal dari keyakinan terhadap kebenaran, al-haq, dan pengamalan sesuai dengan keyakinan tersebut. Dua aspek kebahagiaan. Al-atas membagi kebahagiaan menjadi dua dimensi yang saling terkait. Yang pertama ada dimensi duniawi, yaitu ketenangan pikiran dan tubuh yang diperoleh melalui kehidupan yang benar. Yang kedua ada dimensi ukhrawi, kebahagiaan tertinggi dan abadi yang dicapai di akhirat setelah melihat Tuhan, ru'yatullah. Terus yang ketiga, kebahagiaan versus penderitaan, saqawah. Lawan dari kebahagiaan atau sa'adah adalah saqawah yang sering diterjemahkan sebagai penderitaan atau kesengsaraan. Namun, al-atas menjelaskan bahwa penderitaan dalam Islam adalah kondisi jiwa yang jauh dari petunjuk Tuhan dan tertangkap dalam keraguan intelektual. Yang keempat, peran akal dan kalbu. Kebahagiaan hanya bisa dicapai jika akal manusia telah mengenal tempat yang tepat bagi segala sesuatu dalam tatanan penciptaan. Terus, kebahagiaan berkaitan dengan kepastian, yakin akan kebenaran. Orang yang ragu-ragu tidak akan pernah bahagia, karena keraguan adalah lawan dari kepastian yang membawa ketenangan pada kalbu. 5. Kritik terhadap psikologi modern. Al-atas mengkritik pandangan modern yang menganggap kebahagiaan sebagai tujuan akhir yang dicapai melalui kepuasan keinginan nafsu. Dalam Islam, kebahagiaan adalah akibat dari penyerahan diri secara total kepada kehendak Allah. Istilah kunci. Nah, jadi ada kunci dalam kebahagiaan. Yang pertama ada sa'adah, kebahagiaan spiritual dan intelektual yang mendalam. Yang kedua ada yakin, kepastian tanpa keraguan terhadap rukun iman. Yang ketiga ada saqawah, kesengsaraan jiwa akibat berpaling dari Tuhan. Yang keempat ada dunia material sebagai tempat ujian, bukan tujuan kebahagiaan sejati. Bab ini menyimpulkan bahwa kebahagiaan sejati dalam Islam adalah kondisi jiwa yang sadar akan posisinya terhadap Tuhan dan merasa damai karena telah melaksanakan janji setianya kepada Sang Pencipta. Lanjut. Oke, kita lanjut ke bab selanjutnya. The nature of man and the physiology of the human soul. Man has a dual nature. He is both body and soul. He is at once physical being and spirit. God taught him the names al-asma of everything. By the names we infer that it means the knowledge al-ilm of everything al-ashya. This knowledge does not encompass the knowledge of the specific nature of the essence al-dat or the inmost ground al-isr of a thing, shay, such as, for example, the spirit or ruh. It refers to the knowledge of accidents, singular, an attribute pertaining to the essence of things sensible and intelligible, maksurat and makulat, so as to make known the relation and distinction existing between them and to clarify their natures within these domains in order to discern and so understand their meanings. There is their cause, use, and specific individual purpose. Man is, however, also given limited knowledge of the spirit, of his true and real self or soul, and by means of this knowledge he is able to arrive at knowledge about God al-Ma'rifah and his absolute oneness, that God is his true Lord, Allah, and object of worship, al-Islah. The state of knowledge in man is a spiritual substance, which is variously referred to in the Holy Quran, sometimes as his heart, al-qalb, or his soul or self, an-nafs, or his spirit, ar-ruh, or his intellect, al-aql. In virtue of the truth, the man can know God in his absolute unity and his love. Such knowledge and the reality of the situation that necessarily follow from it has bound man in covenant al-mithaq al-ahad, determining his purpose and attitude and action with respect to himself in his relation to God. This binding and determining of man to a covenant with God and to a precise nature in regard to his purpose, attitude, and action is the binding and determining in religion, ad-din, which entails through submission al-Islam. Thus, knowledge and religion are natural correlates in the nature of man. That is the original nature in which God has created him, al-fitrah. Man's purpose in therefore of to know and to serve God, ibadah, and his duty is obedience, ta'ah to God, which conforms with his essential nature created for him by God. But man is also composed or forgetfulness, nisyan, as a prophetic tradition says, and he is called insan basically racially because having received to himself the truth of the covenant he sealed with God, which entails obedience of his commands and prohibition, he forgot Nasia to fulfill his duty and his purpose. Hence, according to Ibn Abbas, with reference to a passage in the Holy Quran, the term insan is derived from Nasia when he said that man is called insan because having covenanted with God, he forgot Nasia. Forgetfulness is the cause of man's disobedience, and this blameworthy nature inclines him toward injustice, zulm, and ignorance, jahl. But God has equipped him with the power and faculties of right vision and apprehension, of real suffering, of truth, of right speech and communication, and he has indicated to him the right and the wrong with respect to the course of action he should take so that he might strive to attain his right destiny. The choice for the better ikhtiyar is left to him. Moreover, God has equipped him with intelligence to know and distinguish reality from non-reality, truth from falsehood, and rectitude from error. And even though his intelligence, or rather his imaginative and estimative faculties might confuse him, and provided he is sincere and true to his noble nature, God, out of his bounty, mercy, and grave. Will I and guide him to to at, to attend to trust and right conduct. The supreme example of this is the case of the Prophet Ibrahim, upon whom the peace meant thus equipped and fortified is meant to be the vicegerent Khalifah of God on earth, and as such the weighty burden of trust, amanah, is placed upon him, the trust and responsibility to rule according to God's will and purpose and his pleasure. The trust implies responsibility to rule with justice, and the rule means not simply ruling in the socio-political sense, nor in the controlling of nature in the scientific sense, but more fundamentally in its encompassing of the meaning of nature, at-tabiyah. It means the ruling, governing, controlling, and maintaining of man by himself of his rational soul. The term heart, qalb, soul or self, nafas, spirit, ruh, and intellect, al-aql, used in relation to the soul, it conveys two meanings, the one referring to the material or physical aspect of man, or to the body, and the other to the non-material, imaginal, and intelligential or spiritual aspect, or to the soul of man in general. And from the ethical point of view, the first meaning denotes that aspect from which originates the blameworthy qualities in man, and they are the animal powers which, in spite of their being beneficial to man in some respect, are in conflict with the intellectual power. The entrenchment of blameworthiness to the animal powers inherent in the physical aspect of man should not be confused with the idea of denigration of the human body, which is in the net against the teachings of Islam. The human being is created in the base of molds, but without true faith and good works he worse than the lowly beasts. It is against this non-beneficial aspect of the animal power that the Holy Prophet used when he alluded to the greater struggle, jihad, of man, for they are the enemy within. The second meaning refers to the reality of man and to his essence. To this meaning refers the will, known prophetic tradition. Whoever knows himself knows his Lord. Oke, jadi yang selanjutnya ini berjudul The Nature of Man and Psychology of the Human Soul. Sifat alami manusia dan psikologi jiwa manusia. Bab ini membahas struktur metafisika diri manusia. Jadi sifat alami manusia dan psikologi jiwa manusia. 1. Definisi manusia sebagai hewan natik. Al atas menjelaskan definisi klasik manusia dalam tradisi Islam sebagai hewan natik. Kelimanya, jadi manusia adalah hewan yang berakal atau berbicara, berpikir. Namun kata natik di sini bukan sekedar kemampuan berbicara, melainkan kemampuan jiwa manusia untuk menangkap makna universal dan merumuskan ilmu pengetahuan. Itu jadi istilahnya natik. Yang kedua, dualitas sifat manusia. Manusia terdiri dari dua unsur utama. Yang pertama ada unsur jasad atau materi, yaitu tubuh fisik yang bersifat fana dan termasuk dalam alam materi. Yang kedua ada unsur ruh, ruhani, jiwa yang bersifat tetap, abadi, dan berasal dari perintah Tuhan, amrul rabbi. Yang ketiga, tingkatan jiwa, an-nafas. Al atas merujuk pada Al-Quran untuk menjelaskan tiga kondisi tingkatan jiwa manusia. Yang pertama, an-nafsu al-ammarah. Itu artinya jiwa jiwa yang cenderung pada nafsu rendah dan kejahatan. Yang kedua, ada an-nafs al-lawwamah, jiwa yang sadar akan kesalahan dan mencela diri sendiri ketika berbuat dosa, hati nurani. Terus yang ketiga, ada an-nafsu al-mutmainnah, jiwa yang telah mencapai ketenangan dan kepuasan dalam pengabdian kepada Tuhan. Yang keempat, akal, qalb, ruh, dan sir. Penulis menjelaskan bahwa istilah-istilah ini seringkali merujuk pada hal yang sama dalam psikologi Islam, yaitu hakikat spiritual manusia. Yang pertama, ada qalb, hati. Hati itu menjadi pusat intuisi dan pengenalan terhadap Tuhan. Yang kedua, ada akal, intelek, alat untuk memahami realitas fisik dan metafisik, itu akal. Yang ketiga, ada ruh, esensi kehidupan yang ditentukan oleh Allah. Terus yang kelima, perjanjian primordial, mithaq. Jadi pada surat Al-A'raf ayat 172 yang berarti jiwa setiap manusia telah mengakui ketuhanan Allah bahkan sebelum ia dilahirkan ke dunia. Oleh karena itu, tugas manusia di bumi adalah untuk mengingat dan mengakui kembali janji tersebut melalui ibadah dan ilmu. Terus yang keenam, pengetahuan dan kebenaran. Manusia memiliki potensi untuk mencapai kebenaran karena jiwanya dirancang untuk mengenali kebenaran. Ketidakmampuan manusia mengenal Tuhan dianggap sebagai penyakit pada jiwa atau penyimpangan dari fitrahnya. Jadi, bab ini menegaskan bahwa psikologi dalam Islam bukan hanya soal perilaku lahiriah, melainkan tentang perjalanan spiritual jiwa untuk kembali kepada asalnya. Kesehatan jiwa ditentukan oleh sejauh mana ia mampu mengendalikan nafsu jasmaninya di bawah bimbingan akal dan wahyu. Terus kita coba selanjutnya, on quiddity and essence. In our epistemology, we affirm the possibility of knowledge and the reality of things and establish sense perception and observation. Reason through report based on authority and intuition as source and method of knowledge. With regard to the problem connected with the nature of existence in its relation to reality as known by means of rational analysis and demonstration, we maintain that according to the level of knowledge based upon sense perception and reason, which we consider to be valid criteria for the verification of truth and which we ourselves apply in our own investigation, existence is a single, general, and abstract concept common to all existence. This single, general, and abstract concept common to all existence becomes multiple. We say it due to a rational division into portions corresponding to things in the course of this being attribute to qualities. The meaning of reality in the sense of there being in the external world something actual to which it corresponds pertain only either to the existence of the quality of a thing, one of them being a secondary intelligible, that is a purely conceptual entity to which nothing in the external world corresponds existence in the sense. And in this sense only in the mental entity having no corresponding reality in the external world. But we also affirm, in addition to existence understood in the above sense and as based upon through report and intuition founded upon the authority of the Holy Quran and the tradition as well as upon reason and experience, that there in another entity corresponding to the purely conceptual motion of existence which is not mental but real. This other entity is the reality of existence, which produces in the mind the notion of existence as a pure concept, as well as the notion of things and their quiddities, to which positions of existence as a conceptual entity are correspondingly attributes. We have given a gist of this already, identifying the reality of existence, which is also absolute existence, with the aspect of God referred to in the Holy Quran as that which encompasses everything in a pervasive sort of way and which remains after perishing of created things. Our motion of a thing as it is immediately perceived, in this case a man, for example, is simply that of a real, concrete existence, mawjud, having a particular individuality to which a word, for example, man, is applied to denote it, and which word, when mentioned, will bring to mind to the object which it denotes. This, in brief, describes our primary notion of a thing, a physical object of the sense, the mind, when contemplating the thing which demands its definition, and in answer to its own inner question about the thing, what is it? Proceed to analyze it, to judge, discriminate, clarify, and classify it until it arrives at a definition of the thing. That is rational animal in the case of man. In this concept forming process, the mind is able to abstract the thing's whatness from its existence here being considered as something which is attribute to the thing itself, as if it were a property of the thing that is superadded to it. This whatness is quiddity, mahiyya. In this way, a mental division as distinction is made between quiddity and existence, quiddity being considered and the reality of a thing, whereas existence is that which qualifies it. From this we distinguish two stages of understanding. The primary stage of understanding refers to the object of physics, to create things, such as indicated by the word animal, to converse things, such as indicated by the word animal with respect to man, to which apply the 10 Aristotelian categories of substance, or the stuff of which a physical thing is made: quantity, quality, relation, place, time, posture, possession, action, and passivity, or being acted upon. Things as such as are the original stuff from which are derived primary ideas, apprehended by the intellect, called primary intelligibles, al-makulat al-aula. They things are the correctly existent objects of the external world that correspond the concept derived from them, which we call primary intelligibles. The secondary stage of understanding, however, refers not to the objects of physics, but rather to those of logic. It pertains to a highly abstract mental process, a rational elaboration of concepts arrived at the established according to the rules of logic and the logical divisions of genus, species, and difference. Thus, at this stage, the mind reflects upon itself, its own contents, as it were, and the way it understands the ideas it formulates. The ideas or concepts do not correspond with anything in the external world, as they are not concepts that are derived from concrete objects, but are concept like the concept of rational animal, as derived from another concept. Man, concepts such as these are called secondary intelligible. Al-Maqulat at-Ta'niyah. It is clear from the foregoing explanation that the reality of a thing, as understood according to the rules of logic and the logical division of genus, species, and difference, refers to quiddity as opposed to existence, and the sense that the quiddity is regarded as the reality which is distinct from and is qualified conceptually by existence, the relation between quiddity and existence being respectively like that of the object and predicate. This perspective involves then understanding of the nature of existence and a secondary intelligible to which meaning in the external world correspond. Jadi pada bab yang selanjutnya ini bertemakan on quiddity and essence, tentang hakikat dan esensi. Bab ini merupakan salah satu bagian yang paling teknis dan filosofis karena membahas landasan ontologis dari metafisika Islam, khususnya mengenal bagaimana realitas dipahami. Oke, tentang hakikat dan esensi. Yang pertama ada definisi hakikat, quiddity atau mahiyah, dan esensi, essence atau God. Al atas membedakan antara apa yang membuat sesuatu menjadi dirinya sendiri di dalam pikiran dan apa yang ada di luar pikiran. Yang pertama, ada hakikat mahiyah. Jawaban atas pertanyaan, apa itu whatness? Ini adalah batasan atau definisi intelektual tentang sesuatu. Yang kedua, esensi dot, merujuk pada realitas sesuatu yang ada secara nyata di luar pikiran. Terus, yang kedua, masalah fundamental antara eksistensi, wujud, dan esensi. Jadi pada ini membahas perdebatan besar dalam filsafat Islam tentang mana yang lebih utama, keberadaan, eksistens, atau hakikat benda tersebut, quiddity. Al atas mengikuti pandangan para sufi metafisikawan seperti Mullah Sadra bahwa eksistensi atau wujud adalah realitas primer. Esensi atau hakikat hanyalah batasan intelektual yang kita berikan pada tingkat-tingkat eksistensi yang berbeda. Realitas sebagai sesuatu yang dinamis. Segala sesuatu yang kita lihat di dunia ini bukanlah beda statis yang memiliki esensi tetap secara mandiri. Sebaliknya, segala sesuatu adalah bentuk penampakan atau teofani dari eksistensi mutlak Allah. Oleh karena itu, realitas adalah tunggal dalam hakikatnya, wahdat al-wujud dalam pengertian namun beragam dan penampaknya. Yang empat, peran intelek dalam memahami hakikat. Intelek manusia mampu memisahkan antara konsep, ide tentang pohon dan realitas pohon yang ada di dunia nyata. Al atas menekankan bahwa ilmu yang benar adalah ketika intelek manusia mampu menangkap esensi spiritual dari benda-benda, bukan sekadar ciri atau fisik atau materialnya. Yang kelima, hubungan dengan nama-nama Tuhan, Asmaul Husna. Esensi segala sesuatu pada akhirnya bersumber dari sifat-sifat Allah. Segala sesuatu di alam semesta eksis karena Allah memberikan wujud kepadanya sesuai dengan pola atau ketetapannya. Jadi intisari dari bab yang tadi adalah dunia materi tidak memiliki eksistensi mandiri yang nyata. Keberadaan benda-benda di sekitar kita hanyalah pantulan dari eksistensi sejati, yaitu Allah. Memahami hal ini penting untuk menghindari pandangan materialisme yang menganggap benda mati sebagai realitas tinggi. Oke, yang untuk yang terakhir yang berjudul The Definition of Knowledge. The Definition of Knowledge, definisi ilmu pengetahuan. Di sini akan merumuskan apa itu ilmu dalam Islam yang menjadi landasan bagi gagasannya mengenai islamisasi ilmu pengetahuan. Definisi ilmu pengetahuan. Yang pertama, definisi ilmu pengetahuan secara epistemologis. Al-Atas memberikan definisi yang sangat terkenal tentang ilmu dalam dua arah. Yang pertama, bagi jiwa manusia, ilmu adalah tibanya makna ke dalam jiwa. Yang kedua, sebagai objek, ilmu adalah tibanya jiwa pada makna. Yang kedua, makna versus informasi. Al-Atas membedakan antara informasi dan makna. Ilmu bukan sekedar tumpukan data atau informasi, melainkan pemahaman tentang makna sesuatu dalam hubungannya dengan sistem tatanan ketuhanan. Artinya, makna adalah pengenalan akan tempat yang tepat bagi segala sesuatu dalam suatu sistem. Terus lanjut, yang ketiga, ada hierarki ilmu pengetahuan. Al-Atas membagi ilmu menjadi dua kategori besar. Yang pertama, ilmu pemberian Tuhan, knowledge of perposition, revealed science, ilmu yang diberikan Allah melalui wahyu kepada para nabi, Al-Quran dan Sunnah. Ini adalah ilmu yang mutlak benar dan memberikan petunjuk hidup. Yang kedua, ada ilmu capaian, acquired science, ilmu yang dicapai manusia melalui observasi, akal, dan pengalaman. Sains, matematika, filsafat, dan lain-lain. Ilmu ini bersifat relatif dan baru dibimbing oleh ilmu wahyu. Yang keempat, tujuan ilmu, adab. Tujuan akhir mencari ilmu dalam Islam bukanlah sekedar untuk kemajuan material atau teknologi, melainkan untuk menanamkan adab pada diri manusia. Jadi, adab adalah pengenalan dan pengakuan akan tempat, kondisi, dan status yang tepat dalam kehidupan, serta disiplin diri dalam mengamalkan pengenalan tersebut. Terus yang kedua, orang yang berilmu adalah orang yang beradab, yaitu orang yang tahu posisi dirinya di hadapan Tuhan, sesama manusia, dan alam semesta. Yang kelima, masalah loss of adab, kehilangan adab. Al-Atas menyimpulkan bahwa krisis utama dunia Islam saat ini disebabkan oleh kekacauan ilmu, confusion of knowledge, yang menyebabkan hilangnya adab dan akhirnya memunculkan pemimpin yang tidak layak. Jadi kesimpulan dari judul terakhir yang saya bawa ini, jadi ini merangkum seluruh argumen Al-Atas bahwa untuk memulihkan peradaban Islam, kita harus kembali pada definisi ilmu yang benar. Metafisika Islam yang dibahas di bab-bab sebelumnya adalah kerangka untuk memastikan bahwa ilmu pengetahuan yang kita miliki tidak memisahkan kita dari Tuhan, sekularisasi, melainkan justru mendekatkan kita kepadanya. Terus ya, cukup sekian yang dapat saya sampaikan, kurang lebihnya mohon maaf. Ya, mungkin cukup sekian, terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ini